Welcome everyone. This is episode 6 of the Transmaxxing podcast, and today's focus is on the political situation in the United States. As you probably are aware, conservatives in the United States, together with some other actors, are attacking trans rights very aggressively, and this is fueled largely by Christian fundamentalism. So why not turn this over to our guest Glow and her take on the political situation.
Well, personally, I'm someone who's probably not affected, but I've seen a lot of like things where it's mainly two sides. Where one side is more more becoming more progressive, like more I want to protect you guys. Let's make everything more cheaper for you. Let's actually let you have some rights. And the other side is basically the opposite, where but like where they actually just say, well, you can't do surgeries, you can't even take hormones at a young age. Um, we're gonna just go and not let you change your birth certificate. We're gonna just basically get rid of your existence. And I think that it's pretty it's only gonna end up pretty bad. Where to a point it's gonna escalate, where there's gonna be a radical change, either like more of a trans rights gonna be more implemented, or it's going to be let's revert it back. And I think that for the two sides mainly, there's things that fuel it. For the side that wants to help trans people, there's like usually what we call in America liberals, and basically it's the so-called left. And where they're trying to do it, they're trying to like push it and like say, well, you guys can do it, make protections. And the other side is mainly fueled by feminists that are a bit call themselves TERF, trans exclusive radical feminist. Well, they're not really feminist, that's something. There's also conservatives, because they just really don't want anything that's beyond gender norms. And well, it's getting pretty insane. Well, now to the point, well, normal people, normal everyday people, are now forced to be a bit radical. And well, most of them have chosen the conservative way or the anti trans, because they see these people in the news where you're like, oh my gosh, trans school shooter. We gotta go and stop them. Trans people bad. And there's also like things like getting mad over Miss Universe being transgender. They get mad over stuff. Like basically, especially this is very common around hating mitivs or male to female. And so basically, I've seen like people getting mad over just trans person, especially um, transgender woman. They exist. They're trying to go to the bathrooms. They say don't do it. And I mean, if you look a bit underneath, it doesn't really solve it, even if you ban it. I think the political radicalization is a very gonna just end up being bad for everyone. Well, I also see that you can see that I personally don't live in like anything where I don't experience much hate in like just general laws. Maybe I've experienced a lot of hate from other people, but it's not into insane escalation. Well, I could say that if you just say that you're transgender, like in the place where it's more of a haven, you get celebrated. But if you're in like a place like Texas, I don't think you're gonna have the nicest feedback. And so basically, they're escalating to a more insane way. Now, trans rights always starts at schools, and basically, they've decided that you can't teach about gender and sexuality in schools, apparently. And like, it escalates up to where you just get rid of people's existence and erase them from history. I think it find it ironic that a lot of the feminists, they say they're feminists, they're not actually. They really just think that only women have been like supporting um like cis women. They've been supporting feminism, while we've seen nobody talk about how there's actually trans women who were the first supporters. And so basically it's kind of erasing them in a way. by erasing their whole existence and saying they don't matter. And I think that anytime you can slap anything trans, it's going to be controversial. You know, there's a lot of controversy. In one case, it happened to Bud Light, where Bud Light has sponsored Dylan Mulvaney, a trans woman. And so what happened after was that conservatives got their feelings very sad, ruined, and to the point they decided to boycott. And now basically Bud Light is becoming a meme. It's really become from a actual brand that you would actually buy from to now we're not gonna go and do it. And so basically if you support even trans people or not say I hate them, you're gonna suddenly get a lot of people boycotting you for just saying that. And I think it's pretty ridiculous. And I think they do have the right to boycott. It's just a bit ridiculous that ordinary people even days today do it because oh it's trans and the media in both sides are pretty much radicalizing. See, you see it on the liberal side, they say attack the conservatives, attack the transphobes, and then what happens in the feedback into a majority of people is that they attack the transphobes and then it gets reported on and now people, ordinary people will say oh my gosh, these trans people, they need to be executed, they can't exist. And I also think that's also connected to many things. Like another thing is that the rise of Islam. Now, basically, more people are becoming more Muslim. I've seen it in my area. Everyone's becoming more radical. They've been joking. Teenager boys, especially, are the prime target. They've become more radical, and basically, I do feel like there's some set of like connection to it, and I don't. I think I'm a bit going crazy over that, but yeah, I also think that basically trans rights are gonna just cause a lot of discourse. If you talk even about trans people, it's gonna be very questionable, and so basically it's living in America as a trans person is basically a hit or miss. If you're in a, like one of those safe haven places, it is a good place. However, if you're in more of the majority of states, it's not the best place to live, I think. And so basically you're either forced to just go and shelter yourself. You can't like even do it. You have to repress your feelings. You have to repress those feelings in most states to not even to be safe. And when basically this can even affect the young kids. Now, all we have in the later times when the people, the conservatives, they ban HRT for minors. Basically, all you get are ugly looking Hans. And so basically, that's also going to be a full feedback because they think they're just men who are just like just pretending to be women, terrorizing women's spaces. And so this all comes into a feedback loop where they also get scared of them, even though some of them could be genuine. I'm not saying all or none of them are, but there are genuine ones, and they're just victims of genetics in time. And so what happens after that is that they don't even know anything about them other than they're just trans women. And then they harass them, it gets on the news, everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're just evil. These trans people, they need to just not exist. And yeah, well, everything's being a bit more polarized. Nowadays, like everyone has been going a bit radical, but at the same time, it's more of a people just don't want politics. Even that. And so basically, everyone's just suffering. Everyone's hating, but the people who don't, I think it'll just take a matter of time. And I can't wait to see what's happening to America later. And so trans rights are also connected to gay rights because once they go for the trans women, then they're going to go for the gay women, and then they're going to go for the gender non-conforming women, and then they're going to go for non-white women. And I think it's pretty interesting if it swings back or it goes more forward. And if trans rights, however, gets more accepted, it would be really nice for some people to finally go and exist, and maybe we'll even get more rights. But it's really a bit of uncertainty because, especially if you're a majority, you're just more uncertain. You're like, will I get assaulted? Will I get hated for just being who I am? And yeah, I think we haven't talked about how trans people especially get assaulted, especially trans women, because nobody cares when a trans man exists, but they always care when there's a trans woman. And there may be things that relate to that. However, tomboys are accepted, but if you're like a feminine man, you're suddenly shamed. You're like, you cannot be feminine. Stop being gay or something. Like, it's just so interesting to see how they have very mixed opinions. They, it's like if you talk about trans men, they're fine with it. But if it's a trans woman, they're certainly not. And we also haven't even talked about transports. And so I was thinking that I wanted to participate in a sport. Well, guess what? You can't do it if you're a trans woman because you're going to get critiqued. Because you're like, well, it must have been the T. Even if you haven't started going on male puberty, even if you got puberty blockers, even if you're an amazing passing person, even if you're like that, the ultimate hyper feminine, you can't do it because chromosome? But it's not even the chromosomes at this point. Because when there's even trans people who are intersex, specifically D. La Chapelle syndrome, well, they're even worse. They're like, well, you don't have ovaries. Well, that means you can't. I think it's pretty dumb, but it's all just going to escalate into something. And so it's really sad and disheartening to see that everyone's becoming a bit more radical. You see, when used to have 6-year-olds or 8 years old talking about how they want to like play with other people. Nowadays, they're just like talking about politics. They're like, oh my gosh, we need to have a there are only two gender shirt. We need to go and express our feelings that trans people don't deserve to exist, non-binary people don't deserve to exist. And basically, the conservatives always shout and say, you're empowering, you're actually like brave enough for doing this, you're so based. And I think it's ironic because they critique the liberals for doing like, you're so amazing, you're so empowering to trans women. You're like, you guys are both doing it. And so it's pretty interesting, but I don't think both sides are equally bad. I think one of them is a bit more like they're not doing anything, and the other one is actively doing a lot of bad stuff. And so I think the right is actually trying to get rid of people. And so they're basically getting rid of trans people first, and then after they're going to get rid of gay people. And then it's going to go back. I think that it's going to be a pretty disheartening place. I can't wait to see if we're going to go more liberal or more conservative. Basically, the whole world, especially America, is just going more radical. We're all getting more separated because of things that we can't change. Or if we try to change it, we'll just lose ourselves. And I think that, personally, this might even cause some trans people to kill themselves because they think that they're an abomination. They think that, well, since everyone doesn't like my existence, why should I live? And I think it's pretty disheartening when you see this. And you see like these services made for trans people, you're like, why are they doing it? It's so dumb. That's what the conservatives say. And I think it's pretty just tragic.
I think that obviously the conservatives and especially the Christian fundamentalists driving this, they are not interested in like any type of compromise obviously. And what they do is they start with things where they think they can get like popular support, for example trans women in sports or like bathrooms or whatever they think will get people on their side. I even remember like Breitbart posting an article about Transmaxxing because they were assuming that if people saw that it would make it like turn against trans people. In that case it didn't actually work, so then they stopped writing about it completely. But you have to realize that the ones actually driving the transphobia are not interested in any type of compromise. So it doesn't matter like if you pass or not, it doesn't matter like if you're an HRT or not. Like they still don't accept you as a female, like even if you had like a surgery to get like in a womb to have children, they will still not accept you as a female because like you were born into the male category and they don't want to have like any type of exception to that. I am not sure if it is correct that TERFs are not real feminists, because if you look at the second wave of feminists, they were like mostly TERF ideology. But of course today feminists at least claim to like support trans people. I'm not sure if I trust them. I think maybe the other issue is that like the American left, they're not really competent when it comes to these issues. They just push on whatever is fashionable at the moment, but they don't really think about it strategically. The left does, for example, support puberty blockers, even though we have good evidence that puberty blockers result in lower intelligence by 7 IQ points. In addition, there isn't really any reason to use them in the first place, because you can just give full HRT early during male puberty and still preserve fertility, because you can actually bank sperm fairly early on. So there is no reason, or at least no good reason, to sterilize young trans females when there is basically no real price to pay to preserve sperm so they can reproduce in the future. So why then does the left support puberty blockers? The reason for that is that they believe in whatever they are reading in the media, reporting on the science. They don't actually read the studies themselves, they just trust someone else to do it for them, and then they arrive at the wrong conclusion. I also think that the liberals have the issue that like if you're too weak, if you're not willing to like for example get rid of hate speech, then you're going to ultimately lose, because you are allowing these conservatives to very aggressively spread hate against trans people. And like if you look at the Weimar Republic, like it didn't end good for the Jews, because the Nazis did very aggressive hate rhetoric against the Jews, and like over time more and more people get conned into like accepting their ideology and support the Nazis, and this of course culminated in the Holocaust. And I think one common misconception in America is that people believe that they have this Bill of Rights, they believe that maybe the cause will protect them. But when you actually look at how the United States works in reality, these protections people have on the paper don't really work when you really need it the most. Because there are too many ways in which government can circumvent those so-called individual rights. One common strategy that is already used sometimes is if the government feel like there is some problematic individual, what they will do is that they will go after them and monitor them and try to find any type of crime to pin on the individual. This actually already happens sometimes. For example, there was one case of a suspected murderer, but they didn't have evidence, so they would like monitor him like constantly to just try to find something to like jail him on. He ended up actually confessing, and then he got a way longer sentence than he expected from the deal. But they will probably do more that against like LGBT people, at least in red states, where they will like monitor them constantly and try to like find some crime to like convict them on. So the moment like someone who is like LGBT does like anything remotely criminal, like the prosecutor will be there and like drag them through the courts. And like even if they get like acquitted later, like their lives will still be ruined. Another thing which can happen is that, let's say there is a hate crime against a trans woman or even a trans male. What they might do is that they just don't prosecute the perpetrators. And even if they prosecute and even if they got like all jury members to make a conviction, which might even not happen, then the governor can still like pardon those criminals and have them released again so they can like commit more crimes. Another thing which I do expect we done is that they will probably use psychiatry against trans people. So for example, they might require psychiatric screening, and this is already sometimes the case to gain access to HRT, and then they will like find mental illnesses even if there isn't really anything there, because you cannot actually do any real test for a mental illness. It's all a subjective assessment by a psychiatrist. So you can always find something in DSM to find a reason to discard someone as mentally ill. And then once you get locked up it's actually up to 72 hours. You don't even need like a court hearing for that. And then during those 72 hours they can like destroy the individual, make them like go crazy. And after that they can like have them appear in front of the court and say that look how like mentally ill this person is.
Yeah, it is really crazy how much they put like the power into these psychiatrists. And yes, it is just all subjective stuff. Like you're at the mercy of whatever they judge for them to even give you hormones in the first.
Yeah, the issue
This is
is
why.
that let's say for example you go to a psychiatrist and they diagnose with schizophrenia. Let's say there is some like conservative big psychiatrist. Like the issue is that the courts are very likely to trust a psychiatrist over like some crazy person. And they like it's very easy for them to like make you appear mentally ill when you're not and then lock you up. And most places in the United States they actually have something where they can like forcibly drug someone with like psychiatric drugs outside mental hospitals too via community treatment orders.
Yeah, I think that what you said, Vintologi, about a bill in America, there's bills and like the Constitution. Everyone thinks that it'll save them, but to be fair, like who even reads these anymore? And that's how I personally feel like this. And so you think that you're at the mercy, and the bill will protect you, like it's a human shield. And it's really sad when that doesn't happen. And so I think the bill is a bit outdated because you think that gun will save you from the US military, when the US military is very advanced, and I don't think a single gun you can buy from the NRA will even help you defeat even 5 of them. And I think it's pretty interesting.
Regarding the Second Amendment, like this is mostly useful against vigilante terrorists. So for example, what they can do for example is not convict people who commit transphobic hate crimes. If you're armed then you can actually kill in self-defense. And then in that case they at least have to convict you for like self-defense, which might not go through because there might be someone in the jury who just doesn't agree with that. So this is it's way better to be judged by 12 than be carried by 6.
Well, I think that regarding about how the left is very lenient, and so I think that the left tries to have more of a utopian vision. But in order to do that, there's a lot of things we have to do which could be a bit questionable. Like you can't just everyone wants a peaceful world, but the way to get in there is pretty terrible. I think the left isn't simply doing enough. I used to think that well they're fine. Like don't ban hate speech, it's still free speech. But nowadays I feel like it's more of a bit of a we need to do more radical, and basically we have to give zero tolerance for hate speech of any kind, and that basically more rights are going to be taken either way. I think that it's pretty interesting that you usually think that if it doesn't affect you, you're a bit of a more of a not you're a bit lenient, but when it actually affects you, you become more progressive, you become more radical. And I think that's how everyone feels, even though they're not the ones who are actually affected. They feel like they're affected because simply someone's existence now pisses you off. When if they never were actually the media were trying to tell you that they're bad, you would never care about their existence because you're here focusing on your existence. basically people are being taught that trans people's lives actually matter to them. And in a good or bad way, but mostly bad way, that they're the ones who are bad because they just exist, they're taking hormones, and basically they come for other people, and then other people's rights are being taken after. I see this in a correlation with transports. Basically, people were banning male to females, and they're saying, like, well, you have to participate on the sports based on your sex. And, well, basically, it's pretty interesting either way. So basically, when they do that in like Texas, there's even story I've heard about. There's a female to male who was participate and winning against females, and that female to male was like actually like taking a lot of testosterone. They're allowed to. And so basically, it's really unfair. But everyone's even speculating when that happens. Everyone's like, well, that's a trans woman. No, that's a trans man. You did this to yourself. And so, either that, and so basically, transports also connects to like intersex people's sports. So now, basically, if you're a so-called cis woman and you have higher testosterone levels than what's suspected, then now you're considered a trans woman? I think this is pretty dumb. And so it's always like connected. It's intersectional, but I don't like saying intersectional because it reminds me of a big liberal idea of intersectionality. But it does intersect to many things. And now basically, if you're like the bathroom, and so basically, since there are so many trans women in women's bathrooms, now they suddenly are detecting. They're trying to be transvestigators. They're trying to detect which one is a trans woman, which one is not a real woman, or what they think. And so they're like, well, do they have a more sharper jawline? Are they tall? Do they have big hands? Do they have big shoulders? And I think it's really funny because it's like based on stereotypes. And I mean, I don't fit in the stereotypes, so I think it's really funny. And so funny that they kind of validate me in a way, but it's so disheartening that it's even innocent people are being affected, and they don't even talk about it. They're like, well,
I mean, it's
every
only
time there's even news about
clarification, sorry, it's only innocent people being affected because either you are a trans woman and then you're obviously innocent because you're just going to the bathroom, or you're a cis woman who got affected, you're also innocent. But it's important to recognize that, for example, what they want to do is they want to like be able to mark the trans woman, and this is part of the reason why there is so much opposition towards early transition, especially MTF. If you look at the Holocaust, it actually started with this Star of David, where they will mark the Jews so they could like harass them easier. Because like this is actually an important part of genocide. In order to genocide the population, you first have to single them out. The trans people that pass are harder to target. And this is also like, if you live like in a transphobic area, it's way more important that you actually pass as a female because it actually protects your own safety. And sure, the government could still go after you, but even this, you can maybe avoid by like getting a false ID as a cis female potentially. The most important thing is that if you live in a red state now, you have to leave that area and like move to either a purple state if you want to do like political activism, or just like a blue state. And it, like even in terms of election, it actually helps because if you live in a red state, the red state will be slightly larger, so they will get like more voting power for like the Congress and the president. But if you like move to a blue area, then that block will grow and your vote will actually be counted towards the Democrats, which is way better for trans people. Like they are not perfect by any means, but still way better than the Republicans.
well, I think that honestly, it's pretty sad, and like how people actually have to move based on political now. So basically, if you're especially a trans person, now you gotta go and be careful. Well, which states can I not go in? Which are no territories? Which are a bit of a okay, and there's a safe territories. And so basically, this is pretty damaging. And I think that the two-party system is probably the worst thing I've seen because it's just now going to distract everyone. I think that also, based on my last point, basically now everyone is now kind of sorted into it. Where basically, even if you look, even if you're like, let's say you're a so-called cis woman and you have very manly features, basically you're gonna get a lot of looks now because what? They think that women are 5'2", feminine, hyper feminine, and that trans people, trans women specifically, are very 6 feet, big hands, Adam's apple, thick neck, um, big feet, and basically very masculine jaw and face. And so basically, this harms other women, and now no one's getting privacy now because if you look some certain way, people are gonna get bad looks. And I think it's really sad how they only care about trans women, never care about trans men.
I think this
And I
is a bit false. When it comes to like HRT access, they actually use female to male as a reason to ban it because they look how they are cutting like off breasts for like healthy girls or whatever. So they're actually using the FDMs as a reason to ban early transitions, at least to like get support for it. But then when it comes to like banning other stuff, they use like MTF, so it depends on the like situation. Like when it comes to like non-HRT race, they tend to go after trans women. While when it comes to like access to medical treatment, they go after FDMs instead.
think basically we're all just gonna watch it, and so I think you have a good point about the Holocaust, and basically I do see that maybe we're gonna go back into where basically trans people are very scrutinized. Besides, from the light scrutinized to heavy to let's just go and rally them up in the camps. But I mean, it sounds so unrealistic that you think it will never happen, but there's still a certainty. There's still an uncertainty, and basically, maybe there could be. And so we're all fearing for it that maybe one day this will happen. We're all going to be screwed. We can't even express who we are.
I mean, it's a very real possibility that the Holocaust can happen again in America. Like basically what you need is that you need to control the presidency. You also have to have loyalists in the military, and then ideally you want to have 34 or more senators. And if you have those three, you can basically rule as a dictator. Because like in order to impeach and remove the president, you need to first go through the House with the majority, and then you need 67 senators. So then if you have 34 or more on your side, like they cannot remove you, so you can actually violate the constitution left and right. And you can even ignore the Supreme Court as well. This has happened before. And then if you try to like impeach the president for ignoring the Supreme Court, you don't have enough votes to remove the president, so the president can keep like ignoring the Supreme Court. And then like if they also control the military, it's game over for the other side. And like if you think about it strategically, like you have to be an idiot not to do that, because if you don't do that and like do nothing and then have an election and then lose, then you like leave the door open for the other side to do that against you instead. So you have this game theory situation where you need to like act authoritarian and repressing against your opponents, because if you don't, you let them do that to you instead. And like we already see that happening like between the Republicans and the Democrats, where they like each new election they do something new that they didn't do before to like screw them over. And eventually one side is going to be the losers and get like eradicated pretty much. And like we just have the hope that the Republicans don't win this, and this is not really so much that the Democrats are particularly great either, it's just that like for trans people, if the Republicans win, it's pretty much game over. You have to like flee to Canada and hope that they don't like invade.
I think that right now, I think that personally, we're all just gonna go and think that this can't happen, and it's really shocking when that happens. No one's gonna say anything, and also like we're basically gonna just watch everything either go bad or good. And so basically, maybe if it goes good, we'll have even more amazing things. But it can be scary to some people, especially cis women. Like they're scared. Have you seen a concern it is when they see, oh my gosh, artificial baby or like womb? Oh my gosh, no, we can't have that. That's erasing women. And I think the reason also about why female to males are not scrutinized as much as male to females is not because of so-called, it's because women are seen as oppressed, and that basically they see that the female to male, they're trying to like just fight against the system by becoming the man, but when they see a male to female, they're like, okay, so why are like the oppressors trying to join our oppressed group and fight for so-called our rights when they don't even know half of it? And I think that humans inherently are pretty selfish in general. That's why nobody really cares besides trans people about their rights. They're like, well, it's not my problem because I'm not trans. I don't need to even fight over this. But then when it does, suddenly people start fighting. And I think that I don't think that it's gonna end up good either way. And I'm really concerned about the future. Like,
I think
I think
another
personally,
issue is that when it comes to like weaknesses in the constitution, like there isn't really any political will to really fix that. Like the thing is, things have to go bad before people react. So if the constitution is a ticking time bomb, like people are not going to do anything until the camps are being built and people are sent to the education camps or sent to gas chambers. Like only then are people going to realize, oh, we had an issue with the constitution, but then it's too late. So because of that, like there are like issues in the constitution that could have been fixed. For example, making it easier to remove the president and not allowing the president to just ignore the Supreme Court. There are so many ways to make the constitution less broken, but it was never fixed because the bill wasn't there, and because there hasn't been like any flagrant abuse yet, nobody does anything about it. So then, and once things really go bad, it's too late to really fix that loophole. And so what is going to happen in the United States, I think, is that the most aggressive side is going to win. So either the left liberal types have to be like more authoritarian and push harder, or they're going to like get beaten by the conservative bigots. And what really worries me in the United States is that the people who get like attention and like coverage and reach are the most unhinged conservatives, like Matt Walsh for example, and he's like a Christian fundamentalist who pretends that he's like caring about like protecting children or the science or whatever, when the science doesn't even support his position, but he will just lie about it and misdirect, and because his audience already is on his side, they will not like scrutinize him and shake what he's saying. They will assume that what he's saying is correct without like even checking it. And like the typical rhetoric I hear is that, oh, you cannot even change the sex in the first place, you shouldn't do it. But wait, that doesn't make sense logically, because if you cannot do anything, then it doesn't really matter. Like, even if you technically remain male after the HRT, which I disagree with that, even then, like, it doesn't mean you shouldn't take HRT, it just means that you are, like, maybe technically male in a way. Which is, like, irrelevant really in terms of, like, even it comes to, like, cost-benefit, it's not a relevant criteria whether or not you technically belong to one category or not. You have to look at things like quality of life, but of course, if you're a Christian fundamentalist, the only thing that matters is that what this 2,000-year-old text says, and they base their entire policies based on that. So it doesn't matter what the studies show or what the evidence show, because they are going to go with the Bible regardless, and then they are going to try to like find some studies supporting them, or even like make fraudulent studies, which I have seen being attempted, where they try to like fake some studies to like show some anti-trans stuff, and then they maybe get redacted, but maybe they can like go through in some journal that is less serious. And I assume that it must have been attempts to like fake studies to show that transition is detrimental by conservatives, and then when they couldn't do it, they just like throw it in the bin and try again. Or this is why you don't see this study, because despite like attempts to rig it, they just couldn't do it because the benefits are so obvious. So like even if you try to rig trials against HRT, you still find it to be beneficial. And one example of this is there was a study who like compared the mental health and well-being among people who transitioned and compared it to cis people. And then in two of these studies, the trans people actually reported higher quality of life. So like even then, like if you try the hardest possible to like show transition to be detrimental, you still fail. But of course, like even though like the science and everything is very clear, those people who believe like in fundamentalist Christianity and like transphobic, bigoted, so-called feminist, like these people will not care about that. Like if they see and believe that transition is even beneficial for trans people, they will oppose it more because then they are less likely to kill themselves. So like you might actually be detrimental to try to convince a conservative that like transition reduces suicide mortality, because if they believe that they might be less likely to support it because they want you dead anyway. And I think the issue here is that a lot of like trans allies, they assume that people with so-called concerns were like in good faith when they were not. So they start with, for example, concerns about like bathrooms, then it moves to like concerns about people transitioning early, and then suddenly they want to like ban HRT before 18, then suddenly they want to raise it to 25, and then they want to like have more gatekeeping, so they have to go through like 3 years of like screening and test, then it's 5 years, so it always becomes first, it never ends. It doesn't end until you fight back and win. That is how it is. There's no like room for compromise here. And more people need to realize this. It's similar with Nazis. You're gonna compromise with a Nazi, you have to get rid of them.
Well, personally, I've remembered things about it, and so the politics in USA really do affect everywhere else. And so basically, yesterday I was like going onto Discord, talking in the game's Discord, and so basically, someone who was a trans woman, they wanted to friend me because they wanted to stick around with the trans people because they feel very safe around. And so basically, we see that effect now. Basically, I think that this could be applied to a lot of trans women generally. They want to hang out with other trans women because they feel more safe from the radicalization of America, and the radicalization of America affects everywhere else. And so I think that it's really a bit concerning. I thought not much of it until now. I could see that the real implication is that basically we're all forced into tiny groups. It's really sad.
This is a consequence of liberalism, unfortunately, because if you have like unregulated social media, people will find themselves into echo chambers, and they will be fed by algorithms, things that they already agree with. So it will by necessity lead to more and more polarization because people don't talk to each other, or if they do, it will be like vitriolic and unproductive. And like I try to reach out to like people. For example, the Transmaxxing manifesto actually got read a lot by conservatives and maybe actually had some impact. But it's getting harder and harder to reach out to people who disagree with you politically. And like I actually realized this a while back that like it's less and less common also that people who disagree with us even show up when they serve in the first place. Sometimes someone shows up, but it's actually very rare for people to even like show up here to talk with us about like Transmaxxing or about like even like transition stuff in general.
Well, to be honest, I think that I've seen like this pyramid about humans, and so basically there's like levels, like you need protection, safety, and then pleasure and self-realization or something. And I think that basically what's happening in USA is that they're getting rid of the bottom most needed. They're getting rid of them of shelter. They're getting rid of like basically rejection, basically no rights. you can't go to the same bathroom that you want to go to. You have to now go to the men's bathroom, which is pretty sad. But that's not the important part, is that they kind of ridicule and say that trans rights are actually important to conservatives when they're actually losing their humane rights. And I think that personally, what's happening is that we're all just going to see everyone bunched up in little groups, and it's going to be so divided and so torn. Trans rights are human rights, and I think also that we should be able to do it as long as it doesn't harm people. And this thing doesn't harm others, but then at the same time, I can't really have that opinion anymore because of the radicalization. I think that everyday, like nowadays, everyday innocent trans people, especially trans women, are now subjugated to hatred. And so, basically, if you're on media and you're like supposed to, like social media, you're like told, well, don't make a fuss out of you getting bullied for being transgender. No, you can't. And then basically every day, if you're like a trans person, you're regularly brought up that you're like, oh my gosh, you're trans. Yeah, ew, you're trans. And so basically, I don't even trust the left, the USA left, because who knows? Those people could literally be behind our backs saying, ew, that's a trans person. And so I've seen statistics about how just only 1/3 of people actually accept trans people. And it's so like you're on your feet and you're fearing that, will this person hate me? Will this person be a part of the 2/3 that hate me, that despise my existence? Or will they be the people that accept me? And it's just so tiring. It's so like draining. And like I wish it was more basic, but it was just so terrible.
The thing is that we don't really have that issue in Europe. And I think one difference is that Europe has criminalized hate speech, and at least individual European countries, for the most part, you cannot actually do hate speech there. So like it should be a radical opinion that you cannot like spread hate towards like LGBT people online. But the issue is that the constitution, at least according to conservatives, protect against that. So you cannot actually, according to like most scholars, do like anti-hate speech legislation if you're going to like respect the constitution, which you shouldn't by anyway. But I think this is part of the difference why Europe is like more chill, is that we just don't allow that here. And also in Europe we don't have the same issue with Christian fundamentalism. So we don't have the same radical push against it constantly. And I think one of the issues with the left don't see the issue with Christianity, that how it is affecting, and also other religions as well. I think Christianity might actually be less bad than maybe some other ones.
Yeah, I'd say that's like an interesting litmus test you can kind of give to your parents. Is, if you ever see like a trans moment come up, you can always just say, oh, it's kind of sad when parents choose religion over their own children. Don't you think so? And if they like try to defend religion in any way, chances are they're not a safe person to come out to.
I think in general, like if you have religious parents, it's a big red flag, because they might pretend to support trans people, but then suddenly when you try to transition, they might like try to prevent you by every way possible, because they don't actually support it. So there are some people like that. This is also, for example, why people like Matchbolt are so popular, because there are a lot of people who support them, but they are too cowardly to do it publicly, so they use them as a proxy and let them like take the heat.
The problem I see with America's left is that most of them are Christians, because most of USA are Christians, and so I find it ironic that conservatives are like, oh my gosh, when there's like someone being anti-trans, you're like, you're so stunning, you're so brave, you're like being a bit quirky. And I think that basically you're not being quirky, because you are the majority of people, because the majority of people hate trans people. And you want to pretend that, well, majority of people love trans people.
I don't think a majority hates trans people right now in America, but the conservatives are pushing very hard to make it like that. I think a lot of people are a bit indifferent in between, but the issue is that those indifferent people are very easy to fool by propaganda, and this is what the conservative are trying with the media push. Because people don't check things, they are like easily fooled by some scaremongering. And then they use it to like get votes or win elections, or I'm not sure if it's even a winning issue for the Republicans at this point. I think what has to be done is there has to be a stronger push in the right direction, less compromising, less weakness. And you also have to go after the problem, which is religion. And one issue with the left is really willing to go after like other religions than Christianity, even if they are transphobic.
Well, I really hoped that the madness in like this place really ends, because it's so like I just wanted to chill and not have to fear my life. I think that's a sentiment a lot of trans people in general can relate to. Is that you really couraged. You had all the courage to vent out to someone and like come out, and then basically, if they're like one of those 2 1/3 people, they really just don't like you. You really just get scared. You're like, and then build a whole thing. I think that's how repressing comes. And so it's pretty terrifying. I really hoped one day that this would be more peaceful. But it's pretty sad to see that we're probably going to have to do a lot of more radical changes just to get into a peaceful world. Because it's all not just sunshine and rainbows.
I think we have covered this topic fairly well now. And even if this may have been like disheartening for many people to listen to, I still think that we can actually win this. And I hope that the listening to this will motivate people to push harder and fight harder for what's right, and not caving, not giving up even if it is difficult. And I wish everyone a nice day and keep fighting.